Let's make sure the symbol of peace is broken. Let's wreck his pride. Let's make this hurt.
What's up everybody, and welcome to the first ever Character Scope, where we focus and take a closer look at a specific anime character. Today, if you've guessed it, you're right, we're looking at our own Mr. Han. Our very own residential bad boy from My Hero Academia, Tomura Shigaraki himself. Bursting onto the scenes to the very first season of the My Hero Academia anime and leaving a big impact in our hearts and an even bigger impact on the students and teachers of UA was the tall and skinny young man who led the League of Villains known as Tomura Shigaraki. His mission? To destroy the symbol of peace, All Might. But where did this villain start? How strong is he? What are his strengths and weaknesses? What drives him and why? Today, this is what we'll be looking at. So without further ado, let's begin.
They escaped uninjured and captured my two strongest men. Kids these days really are amazing.
Tomura Shigaraki. Age 20. Height 5'9". His quirk, Decay. His mission, to destroy the symbol of peace, All Might. Upon first entering the scenes, he made his intentions known that he was there to kill All Might and he was well prepared. What he didn't hope for was the strong sense of justice that the students of Class 1A felt. They quickly and easily dispatched his henchmen until help arrived. This ultimately led to Tomura's first defeat, after which Tomura sought the help of the hero killer Stain, but he proved to be too much set on his own goals. To create a better world where heroes would have some kind of meaning to it. This had a huge impact on Tomura's own personal development. You see, Stain told Tomura that he lacked conviction and that all he wanted to do was to just kill, which wasn't enough. After the hero killer was captured, Tomura soon understood what exactly he meant. He saw how easily Stain moved the world with his words and actions. Tomura soon decided it was time to build a method to the madness, and it was time to capture one of UA's students. He then targeted Bakugo Katsuki, but this proved to be his worst decision ever. Due to this decision, he lost his only master, and then would lose to Overhaul, and then would be challenged and defeated by All For One's bodyguard, Gigantomachia. Right after that epic battle, he soon found himself in the middle of a Quark army. He was broken and weak. He was at his absolute lowest point. This is where most people would give up, but instead, something miraculous happened. Tomura was reborn in only what can be described as the Angel of Death.
I'm so mad I don't even know what to say.
Let's rewind the clock to a young Tomura. About 15 years, that'll do. Tomura was born Tenko Shimura. Yeah, that's right, he was the grandson of the 7th holder for One For All, who's also the teacher to All Might himself. She had a son named Kotaro Shimura, who had a pretty normal life, living with his wife, now Shimura, and grandparents Chizuo and Meiko, and 2 kids Tenko and Hana. They lived a pretty normal life where nothing ever happened and everyone lived happily ever after. Wrong! The Shimura family was far from happy and pleasant. Kotaro resented heroes. Due to his mother Nana leaving him in an orphanage to simply die, he had developed a hole in his heart, and as any normal human would, took out his frustrations on his family, particularly a young Tomura who wanted to become a hero himself. He punished Tenko severely, all while his family watched in horror, for they feared him as the man of the house. His word was law and no one dare stood up to him. One day, Tenko's sister found a picture of her grandmother and thought it would be prudent to show her younger brother Tenko. However, Dad found out and he did not like this at all. To escape the punishment, Hana said it was Tenko that forced her. This sent Kotaro over the edge and he punished Tenko in the cruelest way he could possibly imagine. He beat Tenko in front of everyone. This would have a great psychological effect on the young boy, For you see, that night, while Tenko was crying, his quirk activated in the most horrific way. Unfortunately, the family dog, Mon, was at the time consoling Tenko, paid the ultimate price. After that, things spun out of control and took a turn for the absolute worst when his sister Hana stepped out to apologize to him for lying and saw what had happened to Spot. She screamed for help and tried to run away. However, Tenko, who was panicking out of control, grabbed hold of her clothes. The decay spread and the young Hana, before she knew it, left this world. Tenko, due to his panicking, didn't know what was happening at the time. He thought it was a villain that was attacking. He screamed and screamed. His family ran outside to see what was all the commotion about. This proved to be their biggest mistake. Tenko threw his hands down on the ground and his quirk lashed out. They never stood a chance of reaching young Tenko before he slipped into the deepest reaches of hell. But don't you know it? Even when you thought things couldn't get any worse, they did. Tenko's father stepped outside to see the horror that had just been unleashed onto his family. Tenko struck out once more and Kotaro quickly grabbed a piece of iron rod and smacked the young boy across his face. Maybe it was to protect himself from the decay, or maybe it was a way to get young Tenko to come to his senses. Either way, this was the worst possible decision he could ever make. Tenko did come to his senses, but in a fit of rage he lunged at his abusive father, and with the intent to kill, landed his arms on him and forced him on the ground. Tenko's quirk activated and destroyed not only his father, but the entire Shimura residence. After that horrific night, Tenko wandered the streets, covered in blood and dirt. No one sought to help him or even call the police. He found himself in a back alley until, you guessed it, Lord Voldemort found him and took him in. Tenko's memories, along with his quirk, sealed themselves away. This is where Tenko's thirst to destroy heroes soon evolved into the will to destroy everything. Tenko was renamed Tomura, which means to mourn, by Darth Vader, and he gave him his very own last name, Shigaraki. It was at this point Tomura Shigaraki was born. This was both shocking and unimaginable, that this is how a young boy who dreamed to be a hero descended into madness and now strives to erase humanity itself, the very essence of evil that we've come to both admire and fear. So now that we've had a brief look at who Tomura Shigaraki is and how he started out, let's look at some of his skills, power, along with his evolution. Shigaraki hasn't displayed any particular liking to any weapons whatsoever. With his quirk, his hands are literally the hands of death. His only gear are some hands which covers his entire body, including his face, which are a bit creepy if you ask us. They're actually the hands of his family. They remind him of how it felt to be around them. This gives Shigaraki the confidence he needs to fulfill his destiny. Shigaraki doesn't have much when it comes down to raw physical power like All Might, but instead makes up for it with his cat-like reflexes and speed. When he tried to recruit Chisaki, aka Overhaul, into the league, they had a light skirmish and, the result, both parties with casualties. Tomura was quick enough to catch Chisaki off guard. Now, this may not seem very big, but take this into consideration. Kendo Rappa was a young underground fighter that had been taken in by the young Chisaki. According to Rappa, he fought the young leader on 4 occasions and never won. Considering that Rappa's quirk allows him to fire off punches as fast as a bullet consecutively, this would make his speed pretty awesome. On average, a bullet travels about 2,500 feet per second. Rappa's fists generate such a great speed and force that it was able to send Kirishima flying and shattered his unbreakable hardening, which means that Chisaki's reaction time must be greater than that of 0.2 seconds, which is needed to dodge a bullet. Tomura was able to get the drop on him, which is pretty amazing. This is also seen in the USJ attack when Midoriya took off after Tomura, launching himself in midair. Tomura was able to react so fast that he used Kurogiri to warp his hand, which would have killed young Midoriya on contact. Another great example of Tomura's reflexes and speed that can be taken into consideration is when he and the rest of the League apprehended the police escort that was taking the injured overhaul for medical treatment. Tomura leaped from the back of a speeding truck onto the police escort and was caught by a hero. During this skirmish, Mr. Compress used one of his compressed balls to release a large boulder which flipped the police escort in midair. Tomura reacted so fast he was able to flip right over and land on the car right behind him, taking it over and coming off without a scratch. Now to do this, you had to be as flexible and as agile as a cat while possessing superhuman equilibrium, and to be able to coordinate and calculate your own landing with all the fighting and keeping your eye on the environment at the same time. Many would still be skeptical of his strength. We have one more bit of evidence that will hammer our point in. Let's fast forward a bit. The League is now starved. Cut off from their funding and their broker Giran was captured. They kill and loot to survive. All for One left a great power for Tomura, which he now needs to retrieve, but Kurogiri failed in getting this almighty power. When Tomura finally discovers it, it's a large creature with multiple quirks called Gigantomachia. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. He was the previous bodyguard for All for One. This guy is massive, taller than the trees around him and so heavy that he shakes the ground when he walks. He doesn't take to Tomura. He believes that he's weak and not worthy of the successor for All for One, so he challenges the League. The then starved Tomura and crew take on this giant beast in hopes of defeating it. A month and a half soon pass and Tomura is the only one that remains fighting. He's bruised and beat, he's sleep deprived, and even though Gigantomachia is holding back, somehow Tomura has kept the fight going. The sheer amount of stamina that it would take to remain fighting after 45 days with a lack of sleep and food and getting knocked around like a rag doll is simply amazing. The League commented that the giant only sleeps for about 3 hours every 48 hours and 44 minutes, which we can only assume they've been fighting for over 1,000 hours. That's simply amazing. The average human, if put into the same situation, would have been dead long ago. To make matters worse, the League is now contacted by Destro, the leader of the Quirk Liberation Army, who challenges them to come by and get their broker. Without any rest, the League heads out to the city. They are greeted with over 1,000 citizens who are trained day in and day out to use their quirks in an all-out battle. During this, a few members of the League, including Shigaraki, seem to evolve. Toga gained the ability to use the quirks of those she copied. Twice, got over his trauma, and copied himself so much that he could overpower an entire country. An entire country! Let that sink in for just a little bit. But he's not the star of the show. Tomura is. He's the one that seems to have evolved even more and awakened to a devastating new power. During one of his fights, he gained his once sealed away ability to decay people he was not in direct contact with. They simply had to be touching whatever he was decaying at the time, and his speed and reflexes seems to be growing. Now remember, this was after over 900 hours of non-stop fighting that did this. He was not healed, he was malnourished, battered, and sleep deprived at the point where he started to imagine illusions. This was far beyond the breaking point of any human. But then comes the big ringer, his rebirth. He finally arrived at the tower. His dealer and the boss of the Liberation Army was being held up, and he decided in awe fashion to simply bring the whole building down, which is where another piece of his power that was lost was retrieved when he faced off with the big boss, Rikiya Yatsubashi, codename Redestro. Now, this was a particularly hard fight for Tomura. All seemed lost. Tomura was beaten so badly and lost a couple fingers, or so we thought. All of a sudden, he got a huge power boost, and now he could decay anything that he touches, even without having to make contact with all 5 fingers. This was when he unleashed the full fury of his power set. In one of the greatest displays we've ever seen in the series, with deadly force he put both hands on the ground and immediately leveled every single building near him. At this point, his power seems to have gotten an explosive boost. The decay just would not stop. Even Gigantomachia, who was summoned to the fight, had to stop and look to recognize Tomura's power. He leveled, we estimate, to be 80% of the city, and it was left with a huge gap, a huge hole in the ground. Kind of like when Pain attacked the hidden leaf, Redestro had to literally cut off his legs to escape the decay. Tomura looked like a demon who had just woken up from a long slumber, and this was where the Angel of Death was finally unleashed onto the world. His power and speed now known to his enemies. Looking back at when we saw Tomura for the first time and comparing him to now, his fighting power is on a whole new level. His speed, his strength, his quirk are all now to be feared. Facing off with anyone would mean certain death. To have such a frightening power to destroy even a city after suffering through such hellish conditions where anyone would have been sentenced to death. We can't wait to see where his newfound power and his new army takes him. For our conclusion and our look at Tomura Shigaraki, here is what we think of his power. Tell us what you think, guys. Thank you guys so much for listening to me rant over and over throughout this entire video. We really enjoyed it. And if you like this video, go ahead, hit a like, hit a subscribe, go to my Twitter page, follow us on Instagram as well. And for now, peace out.